Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Extended. Chapter 5. The Real Work. A heavy silence hung over the kitchen the next morning, as Hermione prepared to leave for Australia. Rather than eat his bacon, Ron simply stabbed it and muttered angrily to himself. Harry knew there was little risk beyond the ordinary tragedies that could befall any witch or wizard. Dragons, disgruntled goblins, or any other magical creatures or plants one happened to come across. But Hermione was unlikely to encounter escaped Death Eaters. She would also be accompanied by 2 highly trained Ministry wizards, so there was no reason to worry for her safety. Still, he understood Ron's misgivings. Ginny would be returning to Hogwarts for another year of study. Although it was months away, he already felt uncomfortable at the thought of saying goodbye to her when she left. "All set," Hermione said cheerily, as she strolled into the kitchen carrying a backpack. Harry recognised it as the one she had brought while they searched for Horcruxes. Hermione had magically enhanced the bag to be the size of a large wardrobe inside, and no doubt it was full of every piece of equipment, magic or otherwise, she thought she would need. Ron scowled at the bag as 2 loud cracks sounded from the front of the house. "That will be the Obliviators. Right on time," Mrs. Weasley said. "Best get going then, dear." She pulled Hermione into a hug. Hermione hugged Ginny, then Harry, and finally she took Ron's hand and dragged him out to the back garden. Harry glanced out the window before quickly looking away when he saw Hermione pulling Ron into a passionate kiss. He busied himself clearing the table as Hermione re-entered alone. Her cheery demeanour had faded. "Best to leave him for a while, Harry," she muttered as she walked past. Harry nodded. "Take care, sis," he said. Hermione beamed at him, then picked up her bag and opened the front door, shaking the hands of the Obliviators. "See you all soon," she said, as she closed the door behind her. A minute later, 3 loud cracks echoed through the kitchen. Harry kept his distance from Ron for the rest of the morning, and instead spent time with Ginny in her room. He was allowed in there as long as her door remained open, Mrs. Weasley had told him. Even so, for some reason he was nervous entering Ginny's room for the first time. Ginny's room was decorated, interestingly, similarly to Ron's. Posters of a Quidditch team, the Holyhead Harpies, covered the walls. However, Ginny's bedding was not a tribute to the team. Instead, her quilt and pillows were coated with a patchwork of flowery patterns, likely created by her mother. The room was tidy, making up for its lack of space. Ginny apparently felt no awkwardness at having Harry in her bedroom, and pulled him onto a pile of cushions in the corner, where she relaxed into his lap and began talking softly about nothing in particular. It was only when she mentioned returning to Hogwarts to retake her 6th year that he felt her stiffen slightly. "So you're definitely going back?" Harry asked. "Well, yeah," Ginny replied. "I want to get my newts, and I basically learned nothing last year. I spoke to McGonagall. Everyone in the school is being given the option to retake. So I'm going to do 6th year over again." "I get it," said Harry. "I think it's a good idea." Ginny turned and looked up at him. "It means being apart again for a while." "It's different this time," Harry said. "We both know we'll be safe." "You might not be," Ginny said, frowning, "if you're chasing Death Eaters around the world." "I'll be with experienced Aurors," Harry said. "Kingsley won't leave Ron and me on our own. We'll be much safer than we were before." "Speaking of before," Ginny said, stroking his face, "we haven't talked about the last year much. No pressure," she added hastily, when she saw Harry's expression. "We don't have to talk about it at all. Just, if you ever want to, I'm here to listen." Harry tried to speak, but for the 100th time he was overwhelmed by her. He simply leaned his head down and kissed her. After a few seconds, he broke the kiss off after hearing a tutting sound. He looked up and met the eyes of Mrs. Weasley, who was giving them both a stern look as she passed in the hallway. Ginny giggled after her mother was out of sight. Ron did not return to the house all morning. When Mrs. Weasley laid lunch on the kitchen table, he reappeared, clearly in a sullen mood. He visibly perked up when he saw that his mother had made his favourite, beef pie, with an apple pie for dessert. After stuffing his face for a few minutes, he seemed to relax and Harry engaged him in conversation. "How are you feeling about the test?" he asked. We'll be all right," Ron said. "We've clearly both got what it takes. We've proven that." "I agree," Mrs. Weasley added. "This won't be the hard bit. As the minister said in his letter, the assessment is to check whether candidates have the potential to be an aura. They won't be testing your abilities at this point. It's more of an interview to see if you have the right mindset." Harry nodded. In truth, he was not nervous about what was coming. He knew the training that followed would be difficult, but after sleeping in the wild for months and facing death on numerous occasions, having to think on his feet repeatedly, he felt prepared for whatever the auras could throw at him. After lunch, Ron had mostly shaken off his melancholy, and they spent the rest of the afternoon interviewing each other in preparation. Their assessment was the following morning. Harry awoke covered in sweat, his mind bursting with anxiety. Once again, he'd had a nightmare, which culminated in the image of a line of bodies filling the Great Hall at Hogwarts. Voldemort's laugh echoed through his head as he jerked out of the dream. His enemy's face was still seared into his mind, but it did not conjure up a feeling of fear like it used to. Now, when the likeness appeared, Harry was overcome by a searing anger at the wizard who had taken so many lives. He told himself to let go, that Voldemort couldn't hurt anyone anymore. But letting go of things had never been Harry's strong suit. He checked his watch. 6 o'clock in the morning. He and Ron didn't have to leave for the ministry until 9:30. Since they would be apparating, the journey would be much smoother than it had been in the past. On various occasions, Harry had travelled to the Ministry of Magic by Muggle train, flown in on a thestral, and sneaked in under the effects of Polyjuice Potion. It would be nice to keep things simple for once. Harry dressed and pulled one of his old schoolbooks, the Standard Book of Spells, out of his trunk. He sat on the desk chair, flicked to the last chapter, and attempted to read. Within seconds, he threw the book onto the bed and paced up and down the room several times. Months of living an existence spent on edge, constantly alert for danger, had made it so he was unable to sit still. His mind was never calm. Without school, or a search for Horcruxes to distract him, Harry was going mad. He smiled to himself as he reflected on the thought. Maybe this was why adults had jobs. Too much free time was not good for anyone. He decided to go for a fly. He figured that once he started with the ministry, he would have very little free time for the foreseeable future. Better to make the most of it now. On his way past Ginny's room, he gently knocked on her door. After a short interval, she opened it, eyes half closed. "Want to go flying before breakfast?" Harry asked. Ginny instantly perked up. She nodded and whispered, 2 minutes, before disappearing back into her room. "Meet you in the kitchen," Harry said, as he made his way downstairs. Ginny joined him shortly after, and they walked hand in hand to the broom shed. Harry and Ginny had only ever flown together during Quidditch practice, during Harry's 6th year at Hogwarts. It made a change flying for fun, rather than practice, and with Ginny alongside, they became dancers on their brooms, weaving in and out of each other's paths, almost touching at every turn. At 7 o'clock, they landed and walked back to the house, their hair tousled and their faces flushed. Mrs. Weasley had already started on breakfast when they re-entered the kitchen. She tutted at their dishevelled appearance, but placed a motherly hand on both their shoulders nonetheless. They sat at the table, and within minutes Ron and Mr. Weasley had joined them. "Feeling all right, boys?" Mr. Weasley asked, before pushing a forkful of bacon into his mouth. Harry and Ron both shrugged. "Should be all right," Ron said. "Nothing to worry about," Mr. Weasley replied, beaming. "You two head back here when you're done, and we'll catch up tonight." Harry nodded. As apprehensive as he was to be entering the adult world, he was also excited. He would be continuing the fight, and what's more, earning a wage. This was something he had never felt compelled to do, due to the small fortune his parents had left him. But when he saw the state of Ginny's broom, he had a sudden urge to acquire more money. He wanted to give back to the Weasleys for everything they had done for him. He would not live rent-free in their house any longer. He would pay his way and see to it that Ginny had whatever broom she wanted. At 9:30, Harry, Ron and Mr. Weasley left the perimeter of the burrow. All wizard houses blocked apparition with a charm, and as they turned on the spot, Harry felt the now familiar squeezing sensation. In an instant, his surroundings had changed from countryside to brickwork. He had arrived in the Ministry of Magic atrium. "Well, that wasn't so bad," Ron said, as he and Harry left the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and made their way to the elevators. "Glad it's over, though," Harry replied. "I just want to get cracking now." "I know what you mean," Ron said. "Too much time sitting still, right? We aren't used to it." He stabbed the button that would return them to the atrium as witches, wizards and paper aeroplanes filed in and out of the cramped space. They had both passed the initial assessment, but as their assessor, Ewan Ward, had explained to them, this only meant that they could begin training. If they failed to keep up, even their reputations could not save them from being withdrawn from the Aura program. They had been given instructions on various spells to practice and research to conduct in the next 10 days, before they began working full-time at the Ministry. Harry wished it was sooner, as the Aura had plied him with questions, giving him scenarios and asking what his best course of action would be. Harry had felt strangely confident and eager. His instinct told him that he was embarking on the right path. After the Battle of Hogwarts, he had thought he'd had enough trouble for a lifetime, but it turned out he could not rest, not while there was still work to be done. Minutes after returning to the burrow, Harry threw himself into practice. He attacked his preparation with a passion he had never shown for his schoolwork, with the exception of one subject, defense against the dark arts. Over the next week, he stopped only for meals and when Ginny dragged him away from his books and insisted he spend some time with her. Unfortunately, Ron did not share his enthusiasm. He seemed only half invested in preparing for the job and, if Harry was honest, in the job itself. Though Harry would never say it out loud, he thought that Ron only took up Kingsley's offer of aura training because he did not know what else to do. Harry could not blame him. He imagined finishing school must have left a gaping hole in the lives of many young adults. He supposed some would have to struggle for a while to find their way before deciding on a career. He just hoped that Ron figured it out sooner rather than later. Ron's dwindling attention span was not helped by the fact that Hermione returned 2 days before they were due to start their training. As soon as she appeared at the front garden gate, he sped from the house. Harry and the rest of the Weasleys watched the exchange from the window, before making their way slowly outside to greet Hermione and her parents, who looked happy, if a little dazed. Finally, it was the night before Harry and Ron would begin their aura careers. Harry did his best to switch his mind off as he lay in bed. A new chapter of his life was about to start. No doubt there would be dangers, as there had always been for him. But he was ready. This was what he was meant to do. His thoughts were cut off by a gentle knock on his door. He pulled his blanket aside and stood up, taking a few steps before reaching for the handle. Ginny stood in the doorway, her eyes glowing in the way he couldn't resist. She held a finger to her lips, then took his hand and pulled him out of the room. "We can't," Harry whispered. "I promised." Ginny stepped towards him and placed a hand on his face. "Nothing will happen. I just want you to hold me. Just tonight. We won't get much time once you start. You'll be away a lot." Harry knew this was true. Ewan Ward had assured him that their hunt for the escaped Death Eaters would involve a lot of travel, not just throughout Britain but the whole world. Voldemort's surviving supporters had scattered, and Harry expected to be gone for days at a time. "Okay," he said, relaxing and allowing Ginny to guide him back to her room. They paused in the hallway as a snore erupted from Mr. Weasley in the floor below, then continued. Ginny pulled Harry into her room and softly closed the door behind her. Harry shook slightly. He was nervous, more nervous than he had ever been. Ginny sat on her bed and beckoned Harry towards her. They laid down facing each other, and Ginny wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. Harry's mind went blank. The job, the past, the guilt and stress that plagued him at all times, all of it disappeared. There was only Ginny.